They take a bunch of money. But are there other people in the university as part of this? You're not managing more than just the building part. Okay?
No idea. Yeah, it's really happy. Not.
I think
He was here.
Oh, he was?
Yeah, yeah.
Good. Stuart,
what time is it? That's start time, isn't it?
Yeah, 3 minutes after start.
Okay.
They would like his.
Oh, fabulous. Yeah, I should get that turned up. There's. Okay, are we about ready to get started? Dear transport people, we are getting ready to start here. Give it about another 15 seconds for people to find a seat. Look at you, Brian. Okay, I'm Spencer, and this is Maria, and we're the transport area directors. And welcome to TSV area. And if you're attending something else, you may be doing it through MeetEcho. You're in the right place for us, though. We start off with the note well, and just put that up as a reminder to people to remember their obligations as IETF participants. So just to give a quick chance for people to bash agendas, we're going to do a quick state of the area kind of thing, and Mary's going to talk about NetDev, and then Mark and Lars are going to talk for a few minutes about what they're doing with synchronizing specifications and interop testing. I'm going to talk for a couple minutes about about a proposal Benoit has about semantic versioning for Yang models, and then open up a mic on that to just see kind of where we are as an area in that topic. And then we're going to try to have 15 minutes of open mic time after that. Does that work for everybody? Excellent. So what we're doing is actually let's slide this over here because I'm starting to wobble. We always try to start off thanking the area review team, without which Mary and I could not be as effective as we are as area directors. Recognizing the people who have done reviews and stuff like that. Wanted to also mention that Allison Mankin has been part of the triage team since we started the triage team, and she will be leaving that, and she is being replaced by some guy named Magnus. So we appreciate all of that. And Alicia Zhang is also stepping down as a reviewer, and like I said, just want to thank her for her service as well. Just to put this up for a few minutes, kind of what we're seeing with the working group, working group status, and just provide that as an update a little bit. I will say honestly that I think I've become, between the spin bit and ECT1, I think I've become an area director of 2 bits. This worries me greatly, but we're not going to update the NomCom description next year, I promise. Maria, did you have anything you wanted to say about your side of that?
I especially want to mention that we closed AQM, and finished all the documents.
Yeah, the best way to do this is when you move the AQM chair to be a chair of TSVWG, and then you so that you can close the working group, and then we just don't close the working group for a while. Always count your change when we hand it to you. We have a decent number of documents that we've have moved someplace since IETF 99, and I saw that we just had 2 more pop out like this afternoon, so as RFC, so pretty happy about that. Like I say, I always try to recognize people who finish things. Brian Trammell asked me to do a ask about this here. So the Path-Aware Networking Research Group is has this one of the things that they want to do to create a catalog of what not to do in path-aware networking. From the first meeting of the research group, a proposed research group, we had enough sad tales of why that won't work, whatever that is, to where we wanted to write those down so that people can learn from literally decades of experience, and so that we don't repeat old mistakes, but that we move on to new and exciting mistakes of our own. It was a joke. I offered to get that document started and asked for people to drop the names of things that are not good ideas, as it turns out, in path-aware networking. The one I'm starting with is the Triggers for Transport effort a bunch of years ago, and I was BOF co-chair, so there's no judgment implied here. But if you are aware of projects that should be on that list to help guide the research community, please just drop me a note with the name of the project, and we'll talk later. Thanks. Maria, let you take over for a little while and do the NetDev thing, and here is your clicker if you need that. It did 5 minutes ago. Here you have slides, and now you're looking at them. So
yeah, it's a little bit confusing to look over there. Anyway, so we had some updates from the NetDev conference already in previous era meetings, because that's like one of the open source communities where they read our drafts and implement stuff. Actually, that's actually the right thing. They read our drafts, not the RFCs. That's a problem. But anyway, there was a NetDev meeting last week in Seoul. I went there. I was actually trying to find somebody else to give this presentation, but unfortunately, there are only a few people who are at both meetings, but there are actually more people who were at the NetDev and who usually go to IETF meetings. They just didn't come this time. I don't know why. So in case you don't know what the NetDev is the technical conference for Linux networking, so for the network staff of the Linux operating system. They also, so they're not part of like the Linux Foundation, whatever. It's not any kind of commercial. It's really like building a community around those people that code in the Linux kernel. And it's really mainly about the networking stack, but also user space utilization of specific things in the kernel. The NetDev is basically the NetDev 2.2, which was last week in Seoul, is the 5th conference they organized. So it's like, and they do 2 per year. So they only started like 3 years ago. So it's rather a new thing, and they're still community building. So it's actually kind of interesting to interconnect with them. And the next NetDev conference will be in Europe, probably in spring. But they also considered actually to co-locate again, or move to Montreal together with the IETF. So it's not decided yet, but probably it will be in spring in Europe actually. Oh, sorry. So usually they have a very strong focus on performance. So it's not really like, what's the new cool feature we have to implement in the kernel. It's rather like, there is this feature, how can we optimize it? How can we do offloading? How can we do the system faster? How can we clean up the code to make it faster? These kind of topics. So it's like very much in the detail. So there's also a lot of topics around net filtering or BBF, which is also packet filtering, and using these kind of tools for optimizing your code. Other topics that were present at the conference is like also how to test your code. There was a separate workshop about IPsec. Data center scenarios, wireless is also a topic where they're working on. So this is basically mainly the slides are there because these are links, so you can actually click on the presentations. I don't think the slides for NetDev are up yet, but they will be up very soon, so you can actually go through the presentations. There will also be videos, and I just picked like all the presentations that I thought might be interesting for like this community. There are more presentations, and not all of them might be interesting for you. But there were actually quite a lot of topics on congestion control this time, and these talks were actually rather about the mechanisms than the implementation of the mechanisms, so they've been really interesting. And I also gave an update of the accurate ECN implementation and trying to move that forward into the kernel. There were 2 talks about testing, so that's like about software, how to test your implementation, so that's actually something that you can use in a broader scale, not only on the Linux kernel, so that might also be interesting for you. Then there's, of course, always something about XDP, so packet filtering. There was this time, and also last time, there was like kind of an overview workshop. So if you don't know what XDP is and you want to learn it, that's probably also a good reference. But this is like one of the 2 big topics, like hardware acceleration of these kind of things. And there is also a new version of NetAmp, which is now using XDP, which is just a little bit faster than the old version was, if you're using that. Yeah, and then I listed also a couple of topics which are related to security, which also could be interesting here, but again, focus on performance optimizations. And that's it, except you have any questions about it. Have a look at the slides. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask Mr. Nottingham to come up and enlighten us a little bit about the way HTTP2 has been doing implementation and specification synchronization? We're hoping to make the transport area more aware of what's possible with at the IETF, and certainly the one that I spend the most time talking to people about in this space is quick, and Mark is involved with that, but also his own thing in HTTP to do. So,
Thank you. Hello. It's a very generous pink box in this room.
yeah, he is, yeah.
There we go. So, yeah, your area
Mark, do you use
directors.
Clicker?
Sorry.
Do you use
Oh,
Clicker? Thank you. He's the one with more than one slide.
Our area directors asked me to very briefly discuss our approach to interoperability and implementation in HTTP2. Oh, there it is. So we had an interesting situation. We had an input document that we were chartered upon called Speedy, and it had a fair amount of deployment on the network. It was in a couple of browsers and a couple of different server-side implementations. So we already had running code. We just needed to make that running code adapt to the changes that were made in the working group, which were not trivial. And when we got to draft 4, we decided to identify that as an implementation draft. That was in June. I forget the year. What was that, 2014? 13? 13. Probably something. It's ancient history now. We said that we wanted to do interop on that in August at our next interim meeting. So we were on a fairly aggressive schedule of interim meetings, which was very good for building a group of people working towards a single goal. I personally, as the working group chair, was expecting maybe 3 or 4 implementations to show up and to get partial interop. It turns out we had 10 implementations show up, which was fantastic. And within the first day, we had a 1-day interop, and then I think it was a 3-day working group meeting. By the end of the first day, we had Firefox interoperating with Akamai, for example. We had other folks talking to each other, and that was fantastic. That was when I knew that this was a serious effort and not just a bunch of people talking in a room. We had interop events at every subsequent interim meeting. And we were testing the whole stack kind of in a very ad hoc fashion. Because we were developing a new version of an existing protocol, we had the luxury of, you can rely on normal HTTP, tools and test suites and whatever. So, point a browser to a web page. Does it work if the HTTP2 is in use? Yes, no, what kind of problems happen? That was fairly straightforward. We have a slightly different situation in Quick, which I think Lars is going to cover. One of the key things was the ability to negotiate versions on the wire really allowed experimentation and even early deployment. One of the fun things that a lot of people don't realize is when we did that draft 4, that first implementation draft that we put out there, one of our implementers decided to put it live on the network. Twitter, if you went to twitter.com and did the NPN for whatever the NPN identifier that we used, you would get HTTP2 from twitter.com. Which was pretty cool and kind of scary, but that just shows how you can use these mechanisms that we put in these protocols to allow this kind of evolution to happen, and especially when you have endpoints put up not just during the interops but throughout the development of the protocol, and you can say, well, my endpoint's over here, and we put them on a wiki page. And you say, okay, well, I'm hitting your endpoint, I'm getting this error, or I see this behavior, and you talk through that, and it's a great interaction. From a working group chair standpoint, the best thing is when you see this level of engagement from folks, you start basing your discussions and your decisions on the running code, which is really what we're supposed to be doing here. It's very gratifying. Any questions? I think that's just a high level. Do you guys have any questions? Is that what you wanted?
Yeah, can you maybe go one step further, like how you decided when, like which version is ready for an interop, and like how you went on a little bit more?
That's a really tough decision sometimes. I mean, we were releasing new drafts, editorial drafts, fairly rapidly. I think we got up into around 20-ish. And identifying the right places for interop, you have to take the temperature of the room and figure out, okay, how many of the implementations can come to the party? How many are being left behind? Sometimes it's the right thing to do to leave a few behind. You don't want people gatewaying forward progress of the group. But you have to have a lot of coordination between what are we discussing as a working group and what are we putting into the drafts, and then what is being tested for and operated upon. And you have to make sure that the changes, if you make a big change, you need to allow people time to digest that. So it's really just a judgment call. Patrick, do you want... I know Patrick wants to add something.
I think one of the key points of success was that we published a lot of drafts, so there were discrete points. So even when there wasn't broad agreement on what an implementation draft was, we had strong versioning and there weren't any problems in the field. So it was very typical for there actually for an implementation to carry 2 or 3 of these drafts at a time and just look for the highest one that overlapped. And there certainly were ones that were tested in the wild that were not marked implementation draft, but because we were shipping them as IDs anyhow, not just living off of an editor's copy, that worked okay.
Yeah, and you'd have cases at the interrupts where this person be on 15 and that person be on 16, and they'd be like, oh, well, here's my 15 version of the code, and it would still work. You wouldn't have problems because of that. It was good.
Anything else?
No, let's move on and then have
Great.
discussion at the end.
Thank
Yep.
you.
We have some time for more questions.
Okay.
And now we've asked Lars Egger to talk about a protocol which hasn't been transport protocol which has not been tested on the live internet yet, as far as I know.
Hello. I don't quite understand why we have both Mark and me here. Mark could have done this all, and I could have just sat there. Get me a beer too. Oh, I can see my slides here. So yeah, this is quick. So next slide, which is my last slide. Right. So basically, Mark's been involved with H2, and he's also sharing Quick. So we basically learned from what H2 did. Quick turns out a little bit more complicated than H2, right? So, but we basically have the same. We had the same idea that we're gonna. It's worked for H2, so we're gonna do this too. We're gonna have a sequence of internet drafts. In our case, actually, Quick is a set of 4 things that we call the base drafts, and we try to have them progress at the same number. So we're at 07 now. One of them was at 06 for a little while because we forgot to click the button. But the idea is that they all sort of within a few days of each other, they move versions, even if there isn't a whole lot of updates for some of them, just so that people have an easy way to identify the stuff. Pretty much in a pretty ad hoc fashion for the last year, we sort of blessed 2 so far as what we call implementation drafts, and I think it was 05, which was about 6 months ago, and then we did 07, which we interrupt at this meeting. And the editor's copy is always sort of ahead of the implementation drafts, but that's fine. And I think now the next one is probably going to be 08. So we're going a little bit slower because now the implementations are actually, they need to implement a lot of text that's been written, and that takes a little bit longer. So we're doing 3 a year so far, I would roughly say. I don't know, we're going to keep that up. We have too little data. We have a wiki page for each of those implementation drafts that actually tells the implementers which parts we consider ready for implementation. So for 05, we basically said, you got to be able to do a handshake, right? That's kind of a given. We expect you to be able to exchange encrypted stream data, which is already quite a bit of machinery you need to put in. And I think we wanted the stream to be closed, not the connection. So there's a little bit, so there was not very well defined what these things meant, specifically the closing part. Many people didn't quite know what they were supposed to implement, but at least sort of the handshake and the stream data actually worked pretty well. And now we're preparing for implementation draft 3, and we're going to just, this meeting talked about who's going to hold a pen to write the wiki draft for what is required there, and we are increasingly getting more rigorous about what we expect from an implementation. So this time I think we at least discussed that there's going to be a whole lot more that we want people to do in Melbourne, but we're going to order it so that if you can't do everything, if you go down the list, you can be sort of assured that at least everybody will have the first things on that list, and then maybe as you go down the list, there will be fewer things that everybody has implemented, but that's okay. We are also discussing to increase the cadence of these interrupts. We've done 6 a year because we do 3 meetings at the IETF and 3 interims, and that turns out to not be enough at the moment because the coding has really started in earnest. So we are looking to do virtual interrupt meetings. I don't know if it's going to be once a month or once every 2 weeks or maybe once every week, where we say Monday is implementer day, and if you want to join the Slack that we use to coordinate this, other people will be on that Slack too, without you needing to agree with them, book time or something like this, and we're gonna basically run each other's stuff over the network and talk on Slack and debug jointly. That's sort of the goal here. We haven't done one of those, so we don't quite know how that's going to go. But some people do this pairwise anyway in between the interops, because most people actually also have public servers up. So if you have a server implementation, most people have stood one up in Amazon, and if it crashes, it restarts. And there's usually some way that you can actually look at the log of that server over the web, and so you can just shoot a client hello and see what happens. That's been very useful. Especially the automatic restart part, I think is pretty crucial to get that right. Otherwise, you're going to be able, you're going to log into your server a whole lot and restart for people. And we sort of have a way, which also evolved in a pretty ad hoc fashion as a Google Docs interrupt matrix, where we basically say, yep, I could do handshake, yep, I could do data with you, and then we sort of keep track of what worked and what didn't work between these implementations. I think also for the future, there's talk about automating this a bit more, because so at the first interop, I think we had like 4 or 5 implementations. Now I think we had at least 12. And there's several more that are ongoing, but they haven't shown up yet. So it's going to be extremely tedious in the future to fill that matrix without some support, but that's what computers are for. So we might think about some more integrated way to, especially if it's open source, pull the stuff from GitHub, compile it, run it, have some way to declare success and mark the matrix. So yeah, that's basically what we've been doing. I think it's working well. We're not using WebEx or any IETF collaborative tools. We use Slack because that's what developers are used to, and there's a lot of integrations with other things that we use, which is nice. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question, actually.
Hi.
I'm just sitting next to Mike. So.
Well, I guess you asked us to give this presentation for a reason, right? So,
so there was also this idea about defining some test cases at the last meeting. Can you say something about that?
Yeah. So bunch of implementations, especially the ones that actually have teams of developers that get paid for writing that sort of code, they tend to have really nice unit test frameworks, and it turns out now that we're looking at getting the flow control correct or the loss recovery correct and the congestion control correct. It's really useful if you have a way to predictably generate a test scenario with a loss pattern and maybe a delay or something, or if you want to get fancy, a delay spike or something like that, so that you can actually repeatedly test your implementation against another implementation under a realistic but repeatable network condition. And so we're trying to think of what we can do there. I think Ecker has some code and I have some code, and we might cobble something together along some timeline. But everybody sort of has that infrastructure or needs to get that infrastructure at some point, and this is not necessarily, well, it can be a competitive advantage for some people, but there's not such a big hurdle to share some of this, hopefully.
And I just anyway ask another question, even so I go to the mic. Do you have an idea about like how many people show up at the interops or at the hackathon and they actually stay for the meeting? Yeah, so
at the first, this week we had, I think, around 20 people, but it's kind of hard to tell because we overlap with TLS quite a bit at the moment. But when I looked at the hackathon registration and searched for the string quick, I think I had like 17 or 18 people, and we had a bunch more that were remote on Slack during the interop. And at the first meeting, we had maybe half that. We still had a pretty significant number at the first one already. Not sure.
Do those people stay for the quick session, or do they just come for the interrupt?
I think most of them stay. Okay. However, I don't know. That's sort of my feeling. I think I've seen Ecker around, so at least he's...
Nacho Sos. I wanted to know what the webpage or central location to find the effort was, so I was Googling for it.
I have a hard time. It's Echo. Can you speak?
I was looking for the central location where you were gathering all the information for the effort, for the current quick effort that you were talking about.
So we heavily use GitHub.
Right. So I Googled obviously quick to see what it would give me on where your effort was. So the GitHub site is number 10. Number 1 is Wikipedia. But funnily enough, number 3 is how to block quick from Palo Alto Networks. So if anybody from Palo Alto Networks is here, can you de-rank that slightly lower? You want to block it is not the first thing you want to find when you Google it.
I'm pretty sure that page is about the Google version of Quick. So
No, Palo Alto Networks is proud to block everything. They block ECN, they block TFO. In fact, if they catch you trying to use TFO, they'll blacklist your IP address so nothing works for the next 10 minutes.
Was that masked man? Who were
so
you?
if you could tell me how our effort to interrupt will help with that, I'd be happy to know.
My name is Stuart Cheshire. I work for Apple. Palo Alto Networks particularly defeats any attempt to have fallback because you can't fall back after trying TFO once because now you're on the blacklist and all networking is dead. So it completely defeats any attempt to even fall back from these things.
You hit a nerve.
They're worth picking on.
Do they make middle
If you use
boxes,
TLS
or-
1.3, they try even harder, but that's not why I got up. Since Miri asked about the fraction of folks who came to the hackathon and then stayed through the week, I thought it might be interesting to talk about sort of the different set of people we get at an interim as opposed to a full meeting.
Yeah. So one point on the stayed for the week part, which I think is important. So I think we have people show up because we do this interrupt here that otherwise wouldn't come. Specifically, we have some developers that are in teams where you might see, somebody is a little bit higher up the food chain participate, but we actually get the people who write the code that maybe otherwise wouldn't have come to an IETF. And so that's kind of a nice sort of side effect, I think, of having some of these interrupt events here. What was your question? Can I remember?
Thursday.
Oh, different constituency. Yes. So we have, I think, pretty consciously. So we're trying. We realized that if we only ever met at the IETFs, we would not be done in 10 years. So these venues do not allow the discussion to happen at a pace that we need in order to. We already moved the milestone back 6 months, and if you're a transport working group, that is not a big deal. Nobody would even blink an eye. We had people email us because that causes significant product delays and an increased investment in the technology, and that is not a little thing for many people who actually want to run this in production and not keep seeing draft revisions. So in the inner rims we have about 50 people, and the active participation fraction is much higher than at the IETF. I would say that at least like 2/3 in the room are actively participating. It's still not 100%, which is not making me very happy because we still need to over provision the room, and we still have people that don't seem to actually actively do anything while they're there, which kind of makes me wonder who they're working for and how that can be, because we go around the world quite a bit. But it's certainly better. Plus, we do 2 to 3 days of working group meeting where we really have an in-depth discussion on a lot of stuff, and we do 1 to 2 days of interrupt before that. So it's basically a full week, and so we do 3 full weeks like that, plus the IETF weeks every year.
Yeah, it's not just a winnowing. There are a number of very active participants who you only see face-to-face at the interims because it's just a more concentrated use of their time.
Yes, that is definitely true.
If I could do a quick AD interrupt, who has not signed the blue sheets?
I don't think anybody has, because it's lying next to my computer because I forgot to take
Okay,
it out.
so Joe, can you
I'm
help
bad at it.
Lars
I
there?
warned you I've forgotten twice when I was chairing, and you put it there anyway. So that's totally on you.
Hi.
I apologize, sort of.
Brian Trammell, even if I don't show up on the blue sheet. So this is a pretty cool new way to run a working group, I think. I have a couple of particular quips, but I think that there's a trade-off space here, and I'm not sure if it's exactly the right point in the trade-off space, but I get the speed, and I'm not here to talk about that. I really like the idea of basically having sort of testing, and then Acker also mentioned at the thing a continuous integration framework. So it's like automate the test,
right,
automate the interop with a set of servers that are inside something. that seems like it would be really useful for other stuff in the transport area, especially because like, so quick is nice and then it's nice in user space. And, you know, I mean, the Travis or Circle CI script is going to be like 5 lines to get a sanely written server up, right? It seems like doing something like this in the transport area in general for stuff that touches the kernel might be much more sort of a force multiplier for being able to do development, like for things like TCP
It's not that
and
different.
so
So I actually run Vagrant because I have a 0-copy stack, and I need to run a VM so I can run the 0-copy drivers underneath it, and it's, you know, it's basically just whatever you would do and type into SSH, you put a Vagrant -C in front of it, and it does it in the machine. And it's not that big of a deal to do this with virtual machines.
Would it be useful, and I am just making shit up here, but would it be useful to have some sort of like transport layer development tooling something, either as part of TSP?
I don't think it's even
like,
a transport layer thing, right? Because
Okay,
you might as well run a routing protocol over that thing.
Well, I mean, so this is, you know, this is like, I think the reason that it's you and Mark that came in to oh, and he did actually go get a drink, didn't he? That you and Mark came in here to talk about this is because this is sort of like running process code that we've got experience with from the app area, that we're, you know, sort of like through quick pushing down into the transport area, and we're seeing what works from their development process and what needs to be tweaked. So I think there might be area specific things that are done here. But you're right, it might actually be a thing that goes through, like, is more for the whole IETF. I don't know what you could do for, you know, when you get down to routing, it gets a little bit more difficult, and some of the things.
The web guys, Mark mentioned this, but the web guys tend to have pretty good testing frameworks.
Yeah.
And the, you know, in TCP we have NS2.
Right.
Which is not quite the same thing. But so I think we're trying to sort of muck something up that would give us, you know, maybe exactly what we need for quick or you know, some of that. But so I am so not signing up to do anything more and anything more general.
Okay, so
I'm not
failed
stopping anybody, and if you do,
Yeah.
then please give it to us. And so if we can run on your thing, you know, I'm sure that that would be a good test for it. But I'm already very concerned about our timeline. And
yeah, no, I'm not trying to make, I mean, I am trying to make you do more work, but I knew I was going to fail at that. So, but it seems like there might be, like, I'm a very big fan of sort of the running code side of the equation. And it seems like there might be something that we can do, take out of Quick, that can possibly make things work a little bit better in the transport area in general.
Things that people do. I mean, there is the packet drill, I think it's called, right?
Yep.
The Google tool. But and people. So I think I know that Google has a very extensive test of packet drill cases that they basically run their whatever change they want to make to TCP against, and if it passes that, they can be reasonably sure that it didn't mess it up. I don't think we have anything that's open like that. Right?
So there's you could, it might take some work, but there was an IRTF open talk this morning on MoonGen, which I know you know about.
Yeah.
So
I think packet drill specifically, or also MoonGen, doesn't work for Quick because it's encrypted. So you couldn't fake those packets, right? Unless you are really acting like an endpoint.
Right.
So that makes it a bit harder. But you could sort of try and instrument the end systems to generate a repeatable sequence of packets.
You could, if you, okay, let's take this offline, but there's probably a way that you could make MoonGen fake something.
Yeah. So I mean, the exciting part about Quick is that it's actually running on timescale that is maybe an order of magnitude faster than anything else in transport ever was.
Yep.
Which kind of forces you. Plus, the commercial interest in this is certainly higher than the normal TCP extension gets. All of which makes it very exciting, but all of which also makes it really hard to follow because it's not a small effort, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it forces all of us to act maybe more professional than we often do when it's, you know, quote unquote just TCP.
I'm going to let the rest of the line take exception to that characterization.
Yeah, Mark knew why he was leaving the room when he did.
Mia Kuleman, I just wanted to quickly add, like, on the slides I presented previously, there was also one talk, like the last talk under testing, which is actually an Eclipse-based framework where you can have like a formal specification of your protocol and it will test against it. So maybe that's actually useful.
Yeah, once we have one for Quick, we can totally use that. But I mean, so no, I mean, all of those things are great, right? But it's all of them also require quite a bit of work. And the formal specification for a protocol that's under very, very heavy active development is not going to make that development go faster, I think.
No, it's actually nice language.
Hi, Corey. I use packet drill as well. But
Sorry?
I use packet drill as well, but that wasn't what I wanted to talk about. I wondered how we deal with the tension of trying to get other people engaged with Quick and building things on it and understanding the dynamics of what's going on when we're designing something so very, very complicated. I mean, it seems like a working group's got two roles, trying to get people in there and understand it and then build on it, and we're also trying to develop it. And that's a bit of a tricky one to balance.
Yeah. So in some sense, right, the quick meetings at the IETF are almost that or many attendees sort of expect a tutorial on Quick, which this is not what it's for, right? But so that you cannot move the needle on things. So we use the IETF meetings like to get input from people that don't show up at the interims, for example, like congestion control experts don't come to Quick at the moment because it's too much about other stuff, but they hang out in the IETF, and so we can have a session and discuss things. But you can maybe make progress on like one or two issues, and I think we have like, I don't know how many hundreds open at the moment. So it simply doesn't work for moving the needles significantly on anything that matters. So we have to be very selective about the topics we pick. And it's mostly sort of keeping the rest of the community that sort of has an interest, but can't keep up with the pace, right? I mean, every morning when I click on GitHub, right, the entire, like, I don't know how many pages, it's all just what happened in the base drafts repository overnight because I'm in Europe, right? And I'm like, read all and move on. But it's a full-time job to participate in Quick, no question.
Yeah.
And that makes it hard if that's not possible. And it's a challenge for how do you not lose the part of the community that can't afford that, but might still be able to make valuable contributions. I don't think we have any smart ideas. We just need to be reminded maybe sometimes to, well, slowing down is a problem, but maybe focus a session on a particular topic of interest or broader interest or something like that.
I think that helps, and thanks for trying. And I didn't like the meeting room experiment where we only saw backs. That was a really bad experiment.
What was bad?
The meeting room experiment we did with Quick, where we only saw people's backs. That was kind of bizarre.
Since we're chatting amongst friends here, so I disagree.
Okay.
Because it did try to recreate. So if the goal of the meeting, so we try to have a meeting at the IETF like we have at the interim.
Yeah.
So I think for the people who are sitting around the front table and they start chatting and not using their names, they actually feel that the pace is better, right? Yeah. Things move faster. You can have a discussion. You can actually make some progress. For everybody else, it's way harder to follow.
Yeah.
Because nobody says their name. There isn't a mic line. Remote attendance probably especially struggle.
No, I think it's exactly like remote attendance.
Right, but the question is,
sorry,
what's the goal of the meeting, right? Is the goal of the meeting to push development of the protocol forward? In which case, I would say the room experiment actually works.
Right.
Is the purpose of the meeting to allow the rest of the community to catch up or understand more about Quick? In which case, you have to have a slower meeting and have more formalism. Then that totally doesn't work. And I'm actually, so I like the interims a lot. I frankly think we could almost stop meeting at the IETFs because...
Oh, please don't.
I mean, the only progress at the IETFs get made outside of the meeting room.
But maybe in the long run, it works. So
I would like to interrupt you here because there are a lot of process challenges we have with Quick because it's a different kind of working group than many other working groups. But the one thing we would like to concentrate here is actually how to move along with the implementation, how to sync that up, and how to make quick progress on that part. Right. So
I mean, because there's so much implementation interest from people who want to deploy this at scale in Quick, right? We need to move fast.
I totally understand.
And moving fast requires the meetings to use the meeting time as efficiently as possible. And my personal opinion is that if that means that a casual bystander cannot follow anymore, that's fine.
I actually just wanted to propose to move on to Spencer's slide because they also
you get me going now. So
I know. So Lars, go. Do you have anything that's related more on the implementation side of things, or is it a general quick question? Because then we might take it offline.
More on the process.
General process.
Yeah.
Then let's take it later, please. You can sit down for now. Thank you.
Yeah, so the last thing I wanted to be sure and do, and we tried to leave some time for open mic things and stuff like that with the group, but I wanted to put this in front of the transport community. And let me just ask a couple of quick questions. I don't care why you're there, but how many people here go to hackathon? Okay, so I'm seeing about 8, something like that, maybe. And I don't care on what, but how many people here do anything on Yang? A small elite team. I think that David and maybe somebody else. So I wanted to talk about this. Benoit Klaus, who is the outgoing management side, AD, and he gave this he gave a presentation about this to the ISG at the retreat in May, and this is a proposal, but this is kind of what Benoit is trying to do in the world of Yang. The reason I want to bring this up, and Mary and I decided to have this section a long time ago, but it turned out to be a really good timing with Dave Ward talking at the Thursday invited speaker series about open source and SDOs. And I would encourage you to check that out when it's available on MeetEcho, which is probably pretty quick. So this is semantic versioning and structure for IETF specifications. And the problem that Benoit is dealing with is that Yang specifications stay in active development potentially forever, but certainly for a while. But they need to publish new model versions more often than we can publish RFCs. So the idea that he's working with is that the working group controls a structured document and a version control repository. The ones that I know about are GitHub, but it doesn't have to be that, but something like that. And that they do version numbers that are 3 levels, major, minor, patch. Nothing revolutionary about that so far. Where it starts to get kind of interesting for IETF folks. So if you're thinking about major version bumps are basically obsoleting the previous version. Minor ones are updating the previous version, and patches are fixing the current version, the previous version. And where this started to be interesting was conversations about, well, what does it take to do any one of these levels of changes? What Benoit was talking about in the draft, which you guys have the link so you can check it out. But what he was talking about was basically that the major revisions would require IETF consensus, potentially minor revisions would require working group consensus in concurrence with the AD. Which basically gives the AD a chance to say, that's really a major version change, and requires IETF consensus, or basically that patch level version bumps can be up to the editor's judgment with the working group chair. The idea is that you publish whatever version is necessary whenever you need to publish it, but you don't publish every version that you do as an RFC. And like I say, I'm not telling you that they're doing this today. I'm telling you this is what Benoit is thinking about, the world of Yang, and wanted to put that in front of the group to give you a chance to think about something that is bigger changes than we've been usually talking about with the way we do things around here. I really want to also echo the thing that the experience that Mark and Lars were talking about with the number of people that get involved when there's a way for them to get involved as implementers. One of the things that Dave Ward talked about with the ISG this morning and again during the Thursday speaker series was that the hackathon is the fastest growing part of the IETF right now. So I think that part of the reason for that is what Lars and Mark were talking about, which is you're giving people who are implementers, not specifiers, but implementers, an opportunity to help. and that just gives you a lot more resources that you didn't have access to the way we usually do things around here. So, like I said, I wanted to put that in front of the group and let you all think about it. I know some of you are working group chairs, but many of you are in transport area working groups, and to let you all be talking about what might happen in your work, in working groups where you're active as well, because not everybody in here does quick right now.
Yeah, so basically the reason why we're telling you this is because we now want to open the floor for maybe other working group chairs or participants and see, like, maybe you have some other activities where you try to align your implementation efforts closely with the standardization efforts, or you might think about how to align your work in your working group closer with implementation efforts right now, and can give us feedback of anything that you've seen today is useful for your working group as well, or wouldn't work for your working group. So we can figure out if there's a general guidance we want to follow here in future. All the chairs line up.
Sorry, I didn't realize it was mandatory. So historically, is Al here? Oh, Al was here. Okay. Historically in IPPM, we've done interops of some implementations of the metrics, but we try for the base metrics to be basically 2 steps away from the implementation, right? So there's the metric definition, which can be implemented by one of a number of methodologies, which can be implemented by one of a number of protocols. And it's only if protocol methodology and metric line up do you have comparability. So that's historically, that's sort of things that have been under the framework in OAMP and TWAMP. One of the things that we're doing with the registry is to be able to pull in other methodologies and implementations for a given metric that may not be able to be sort of interoped and calibrated to within the tolerances that we've had for OAMP and TWAMP, right? So loss and latency, for example, OAMP is designed to get you many significant digits of latency. And most people who are dealing with sort of like layer 3 and layer 4 network diagnostics, or layer 4 and layer 7 network diagnostics, they just ping stuff, right? So there are much greater tolerances on that. One of the things I think we're going to need to do when we get sort of our initial registry done, which will be, I think there's a milestone in there. I don't believe it. We'll fix it when we do that next big milestone update. Is we're probably going to have some framework for doing calibrations. Like, so testing an interop is not really what you're doing in metric definition and IPPM. You're really doing sort of calibrations. It might be interesting to do some sort of calibration framework like this, or automated testing of certain things. Okay, we'll set up an environment, a test environment. We're going to use 3 or 4 different ways to do different methodology of the same metric and see what the tolerances are. That might be interesting. Beyond that, I'm not sure how a lot of this applies to IPPM. I can keep talking until the other chairs get in line.
So also an opportunity for people in other working groups to be thinking, and if you don't have a thing that you are ready to share at the mic yet, like I say, you're invited to think. I should also ask if there's anything else, if there's anything that the transport area needs to know that you'd like to share in here. So we'll just kind of move into our open mic time for the last few minutes that we have together here. Anything that the ADs need to know, anything that the community needs to know?
Well, since you asked, Spencer, Brian Carpenter, I was actually thinking of mentioning this point in the inter-area meeting, but they ran out of time. I couldn't. Miriam might guess what this is about.
it came to my attention that we have an IANA registry with 256 slots in it that is about 2/3 full, and which is in a dreadful state of disrepair, right? It's the registry for protocol numbers, which kind of falls halfway between interior and transport, since most of the entries in it are transport protocols. And I am not volunteering, but it really seems to me that it needs a cleanup. It has entries in there that are assigned to, well, there's one, for example, assigned to Hans Werner Braun at Merit. As far as I know, he left Merit before I came into my first IETF. It has one assigned to Craig Partridge, which he assures me hasn't been used for 25 years or so. And I could go on. There's a lot of obvious bugs. There are assignments to John Postel in there with no documentation. I don't know quite how it can be done, but I feel that we owe it to our descendants in this organization not to leave them a registry which is in such a mess and such a crucial point in the protocol stack. So if somebody really feels the urge to help with this problem, it would be good for them to speak out.
Thank you, Brian. An excellent example of the kind of thing that we need to know.
Last thing, I want to disagree with my former ISG chair. So I think this is not useful, specifically because the amount of effort it needs to actually verify whether something is still in use out there is a lot. I know, because so we just did it for the transport port for UDP 443, which, you know, somebody asked, hey, how come the port that Quick might run over is actually assigned to some gentleman from, is it Mosaic? So it's assigned in the 90s, and, you know, never reclaimed, and that's fine. And so we actually went through the trouble of contacting him, and he's still around. And then after explaining who we are, he actually transferred the port to the ISG, but it took like 4 months. Right, and that was actually something that might even matter at some point. But
yeah, can I interrupt you, Ryan, for a second?
I told you I'm agitated.
No, say for the ports, for the system ports, we actually are about to clean this up, and we don't plan to run after every person separately. We try to do this a little bit more efficiently, and let's see if it works. And I would like to run that part first, and then we can probably talk about the protocol numbers again. But as it might actually be more the end area responsibility for the protocol numbers anyway. So yeah, I worry about my part first here.
Colin Perkins. So it's Thursday afternoon, and I'm tired, so I'm being cynical, but I might say the more productive conversation might be whether we should mark that registry as closed, since we can never deploy anything else.
We got anything else? I will, if not, we will give you 2 minutes of your lives back. Thank you very much for attending, and we will see you in some place called London.
Is there anybody who didn't sign the blue sheet yet? Please come up.